teenager when I created an online BBS system so that computer hobbyists could trade information through dial-up modems. And I've continued to do that throughout the years. And as the technology got better, as we got things like the internet generally available for personal use, I moved to that. And then, of course, now that we have things like Second Life and other technologies, I'm working with those as I can. I've been a resident here in Second Life since 2006. I know if you look at my profile, it'll say 2007. This is sort of a second avatar that I had created, like many people do, but I did start in 2006. I did have some involvement with the Second Life community conventions that occurred. I attended a few of those, and actually was the healthcare track chair for the SLCC back in 2009, which is where I met Gentle and Corin, in fact. And it was something really enjoyable to do. There's actually videos of quite a few of our sessions out on YouTube that I can, provide links to if anyone's interested in seeing what the state of, health and healthcare type things looked like in Second Life around 2009. Since then, I've developed a number of spaces that exist today. The first one and the one we'll be touring today is the LGBTQ History Museum and Cultural Center. The the museum and center really started a long time ago in Second Life. I created the first version of it in 2006. It was on a private region that I ran at the time, and it's had a number of different lives since then, and it's been had exhibits in a number of places, including many of the Second Pride events that occur each June. And currently, there are exhibits from the museum in the Pride at Home region currently as well. But the main museum is in Dalton. It's located right across from the old Linden Temple build, which is over in that area. And so it's next to what used to be the Linden Village, though really doesn't get any use these days by the Lindens at all. And two of my other builds are a Museum of Computing History, which fortuitously got included as an editor's pick this week by the Lindens, and has had tremendous traffic this week as a result of that. So I'm quite grateful, to see that getting traffic. Actually, the LGBTQ Museum also was an editor's pick during the Pride season last June, and if anyone wonders whether or not those editors' picks or destination guide things get traffic, they certainly do. I can tell you that. And then the last build is Revan Cat Island. That's actually a pretty new build that I just worked on recently. And the Cat Island build is all about learning about felines because, well, the internet loves cats, as do I. So there's a lot of content there about learning about cats, cat nutrition, cat health, things like that. So, it's another build that I've really enjoyed. They always say do what you love and what you know, so that's what I've tried to do. With that said, enough about me. Let's talk about the LGBTQ Museum, and we'll hop on that tour in just a minute. But it was again created in 2006, and it's been exhibited in a number of places. And if you look up on the slide, you can see the original build from 2006 up there, very primmy, as was the build in the day, and. But it got a lot of traffic, and particularly it was some of the heydays of Second Life, and it was very busy. And I've tried to keep it alive in some form or another over the years. Currently, the museum's now in Dalton, across from the Linden Temple building. It's more of a modern mesh build, though you can still see some of the older exhibits there. And there's quite a few exhibits that we'll be going through. So, why did I create an LGBTQ museum in Second Life? Well, as probably some of you are aware, access to information for the LGBTQ community is restricted in many places around the globe. It's a topic that is often filtered for various reasons, political, etc. Um, and a lot of folks don't have access to it. And so I thought having a presence in a place like Second Life would enable some folks to have access to it that they might not be able to elsewhere. Content within Second Life, if access to the whole world is not blocked, is usually pretty accessible to folks. And quite frankly, even in more what I'll just call unlightened locations, like where I live in the United States, um, that access to LGBT information varies depending on which state you're in, or even which, school district within a state for children, et cetera. So having a place where people can go to, somewhat anonymously access this information, I think is worthwhile having, and that's why I've tried to maintain it. And a virtual museum can provide this information in an anonymous, safe setting. I receive IMs all the time from people that say, "Thank you so much for having this here. This is something I can't have access to in my home country, or that I can't talk about openly." And those IMs mean a lot when I get them. And quite frankly, platforms like Second Life, because we can have, media on a prim and such within the world, it really can create a multimedia immersive environment for enjoying this. And so that's why I've done this. So there's quite a few exhibits, and I'm not going to go through every one on this list because we're actually about to go see it. Some exhibits I have are meant to be permanent exhibits that are always going to be in the museum, and then there are others that I try to add and change. At One of the main goals is I've tried to grow the museum, and so at every 6 months or a year, I try to add some new content. I do the same with the other museums. The computing museum just went through a recent expansion where we added about 50% to the floor space and three new exhibits. So it's constantly evolving. Somebody asked me, is your museum done? And I said, probably not. It's never going to be done. There's always going to be something new to add and new um, and new things to talk about. One thing I just want to state before we go over to the museum is that this is not an effort by just me, and I want to be clear about that. There are other people that help me with the museum. My real life spouse is involved, and is our sort of quality assurance person who likes to go through and point out all my mistakes, and floating furniture, etc. So he does play a certain uh, role in the museum and its contents. And I also want to point out one of the people here today, Timothy McGregor, who I actually met in Second Life back in 2006, around the time the first museum was created, who I've actually never met in real life, um, has been instrumental. In fact, the images you see of the museum that I have in the slide deck are out of date already, because Tim put up a new sign in front of the museum this morning. A new animated digital sign that looks much more modern and fun. So, there's a lot of Tim's handiwork around the build as well, and he's been instrumental in this. So, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a group of avatars to make a museum as well. And yes, thanks, Tim. I know you noticed the floating furniture as well, but he doesn't tell me. He likes to he thinks that's a prank, I think. So anyway, that's the presentation. At this point, I think we can go ahead and start the tour, because I think that's what you're mostly here for. You don't want to listen to me. You want to see the museum. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat a SL URL for you, or if anyone prefers to get a landmark, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that. But here in the chat is the SL URL. It's in Dalton, and what we'll do is we'll all start to hop over there. I'll give folks a couple of minutes to res in, and also we know regions can go a little crazy as people are popping in and out. So we'll give the region a minute or two to settle, and then we'll go ahead and start taking a look around. So I'll see everyone over there. If anyone would like a landmark, please let me know. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. Visitors find fun. One is if you notice the rainbow hot air balloon over on the corner there, that actually will give you a guided tour of the old Linden Village, which we are located adjacent to. And it stops at the Linden Temple and a number of other places. And as long as region crossings are working well that day, it will finish a nice tour for you. There's also a space station above the museum here, up at quite a few thousand meters. Then there's a little rocket pod that can take you up there to explore it. In addition, there's a little marina and helipad, primarily just to join the GTFO community, which if folks aren't familiar with it, it's sort of a game within Second Life where one can go and explore places. It's something I've enjoyed doing because it's brought me to a lot of new and interesting places, and so I decided to participate in it with each of my locations. And it's actually pretty fun. If you enjoy using vehicles, and with a name like Aviator, I think you understand I like flying vehicles. It is a fun thing to do in Second Life. Anyway, I think we have everybody here. Um, and so why don't we go ahead and start the tour? So we're here in the plaza. And by the way, I'll mention that Tim's new sign is right out front. So if you remember in the slideshow, I had an older sign there right in front of the museum, and that's Tim's latest creation and addition to the museum as of this morning. So again, it's all never done, like pretty much anything in Second Life. Let's go ahead and head into the museum. For anyone that likes to collect Second Life bears, there is a museum bear here right next to the front desk area. With a flag on it. Uh, each of our museums has a bear, so we wanted to do that. It's a sort of a tradition in Second Life. The moles have bears, the lindens have bears, and so we wanted to keep with the culture. So for anyone that collects, I just want to point out there is one there. There's no charge to it. Just like the museum, there's never any charge for anyone to access the museum. In fact, we do not even ask for tips. If folks ask, how they can contribute to the museum, we typically ask them, please give to some organization that's meaningful to you. I also want to point out, as Corin just mentioned, we do have a BBB stamp here, the Belisaria, for folks who participate in the passport program. You can get a stamp here for the museum as well, and each of our museums actually does that. And I see that Corin just got his stamped, so um, awesome that you've now officially visited, Corin. All right, so let's just talk about some of the exhibits here. Um, some of these exhibits and builds within the museum actually go back a very long time. I want to mention that this little statue here, which is made out of prims called Celebration, was created by an avatar in Second Life named Gellin Glenelg, who I met in Second Life back in 2006. And when I created the original museum, he created this statue out of prims to be in the museum, and I have kept it in the different versions of the museum throughout the years. So this statue build goes all the way back to 2006 or early 2007, whenever Gellin had donated it to the museum. So it's something I like to keep here. And it talks a little bit about our history, just having that here. The museum starts off with this exhibit right here, which is really just some posters and displays about LGBT history. And since I'm in the U.S., that tends to be the topic that I'm most familiar with. But I do try to include topics and folks in the influential people exhibit from other countries. However, if anyone visiting ever has any suggestions for additional content or folks that I've missed that really do belong here, I love to hear those things, and I do actively um, take and add those suggestions and implement that content where I can. So if you see anything and have a suggestion, please don't hesitate to reach out. I do keep lists, and I do constantly add exhibits. In fact, we just added a bunch of content to the museum last December. Um, so this exhibit is just general. It's got some timelines, some general info. In the back of this exhibit, there is information about many of the different pride flags, which um, quite honestly, I have trouble keeping up with all of them. But there's some of them are here on the wall. In addition, there's a very nice exhibit here that Tim made that talks about the history of the original Pride flag and Gilbert Baker's involvement in that. So this is one of the exhibits that Tim contributed to the museum. Continuing on, we have this is just a mural about Provincetown, which is a very popular. And by the way, I believe somebody just recommended about Willem Arondius. I don't currently have that individual in the museum, so if you have any information on them and want to IM me, I certainly would be open to adding that. So please do so. But anyway, Provincetown happens to be something located not very far from me because I'm in the U.S. in Massachusetts, and a place that I visit a lot. In fact, that's a photo I took there at one point. There's a little bit of information here. This occasionally we bring in a little more information about places like Provincetown or the Castro in San Francisco. I'm hoping to also do some other things for other locations around the world. Here in the middle, we have an LGBT activism exhibit. And again, this exhibit focuses mostly on organizations over the years that have been involved in LGBTQ rights. Again, this has been an evolving. Some of these exhibits are from the original museum in 2007 for historical organizations, some of who no longer exist, but had a very important role in LGBT rights and recognition. All of the exhibits are designed to be interactive. So if you touch or click in virtually all exhibits, they will give you a note card or take you to a website with more information. I've struggled over the years with whether to do websites or notepad links. And what I've decided is I'm using note card items for most of them because it seems less likely to sort of break the immersive aspect of being in a museum to have the content here rather than going to an outside web browser. But for some topics, which are just such moving targets where it would be a challenge to keep those updated, I do link to outside web content as well. And if you have any feedback on that, I'd love to hear that as well. If I have had some folks say, I really wish it all just went to the web. Others have said, oh, I really like the note cards, but how do you keep them up to date? Well, I really do try to keep them up to date, but I'd love to know your thoughts. But for now, I've kind of gone down on the side of note cards for anything that's not changing a lot, and links to the web for things that are. And so far that seems to be working, but again, I always appreciate feedback. Um, and that's a good idea. Actually, Ilsa just suggested note cards with a link. I've also considered making some of the displays have more than one area you could touch, one for a note card or one for a web link. That's also a possibility as well. We have another exhibit here in the back, the Stonewall Inn exhibit, and again, this is another one of Tim's creations. He created this mesh exhibit for the museum, and if anybody else ever has a exhibit they'd like to potentially add or create, reach out to me. I'm all ears about that stuff. Okay, continuing on. This is an area that's largely meant to be informational, but also as a reflection. The HIV and AIDS exhibit. Um, a lot of people don't know that there was a virtual AIDS quilt within Second Life back in the earlier 2000s, and in fact, there's a video along the back wall, um,
Oh,
which includes that. So there's a video here that it's a machinima that I shot back in 2009 that included shots from the virtual AIDS quilt at that time. And I believe it was from either 2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame. In addition, there's an educational video at the front of the museum on about HIV and AIDS, and a video back here about the physical AIDS quilt that exists in the real world. And there's some different images. Another item here that I just mentioned because I actually have a personal connection to it. There is a 3D molecule here, resed out as a mesh object, of an HIV protease inhibitor. And for folks that are not necessarily familiar with this, HIV protease inhibitors are a class of drugs that came out in the late 1990s, and quite frankly, those drugs changed the world of HIV from being um, a effectively a death sentence. Most people that had HIV and AIDS prior to that time would eventually typically perish from it. And protease inhibitors changed that and turned HIV infection and AIDS from a almost certain death outcome to a long-term survival and more of a disease that can be managed. And I'm personally attached to that particular molecule that's up there for one reason. I happened to work at the drug company at the time that created that drug, and was supporting the computer systems and the modeling systems that were used to develop that drug. So that's how I was able to get. They provided me with a model of the molecule, and I was able to bring that into Second Life. So uh, I do have a personal connection to this particular molecule. And again, there's a lot of people along the walls that are influential around HIV and AIDS. And again, if you have any recommendations for folks, please send me an IM or a note card because I'm always looking to add content when it's available. So this is meant to be both an educational as well as a reflective exhibit. Okay, we'll just go ahead and move upstairs. So we're going to have to go back through the original area here a bit to get to the stairs. I probably went the long way around, but and didn't need to, but we'll call it the scenic tour. So I'll give folks a chance to get up here. For anyone that wants to cheat, there are some benches with seating up here that you can always pan over with your camera and sit on them if you don't feel like walking over. Okay. So when we get upstairs, this is actually one of the newest exhibits. We just added this exhibit in December, but um, this is an exhibit that talks about LGBTQ marriage, or as some folks call it, same-sex marriage or gay marriage. There's a number of terms that this goes through. And again, this is a topic that is very much a moving target. Um, in locations such as the U.S., we've been quite fortunate to have LGBTQ marriage for a number of years, but one thing I've learned over time is you can't take anything for granted. And quite frankly, a change in, the administration of government, even in places like the US, we can't take it for granted. And so there's a bit of content here about LGBT or same-sex marriage, as well as marriage between various genders, etc. Tackling those topics, particularly as we're now a society with more gender fluidity, and terminology. Changing over time. So there's a few exhibits here that really talk about that topic, and many of these point to web pages because again this is a topic that's going to change a lot and changes every day, so clicking on these particular exhibits will take you to um, different websites in many cases. There's also some timelines as well as some graphics about same-sex marriage legality throughout the world. I'm going to do my best to try to keep those updated, but again, moving target problem, so I'll do what I can. Continuing on then, so this particular exhibit, the next two exhibits are actually this one coming up, the influential people exhibit, one of the most popular exhibits of the museum. I get a lot of IMs and feedback about this, about folks that message me and say, oh, they see somebody here who was a role model to them as they were growing up, or somebody that influenced them in their lives. And a lot of times I get, hey, I notice you don't have person X here in the exhibit, and so I get a lot of suggestions too, and that's how this keeps expanding. So again, I'm always open to additional um, recommendations for folks here. But if you want to take a look around through this exhibit, this is meant to try to have a, a, a sort of cross section of a lot of influential folks from the LGBT community, either activists, political activists, folks that were educators, um, and such. And again, if you have any suggestions, please feel free to reach out. All of these are clickable. They have note cards. So if you want information about any individual, you just click on and you can learn a bit about them and what their contributions um, and their work was. And I really tried to keep this more international. So while I mentioned from the US, and that tends to be my frame of reference for a lot of things, um, have tried to include people from other countries, from other um, cultures, etc., wherever possible. And I know somebody just said, "What the Alexander the Great?" Indeed, if you click, you'll learn a little bit about that. And Little Bear, we do have some folks from the UK here, as well as some other folks from the EU. So this is an exhibit. You know, again, if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears. Another exhibit here. This one is transient. It will be here for a while and will probably get replaced with something else over time. But the Castro, for folks, since Second Life Linden Lab is in San Francisco, um, the Castro is certainly an area that has a lot of history in the LGBTQ world. And so there's a bit of some photos. These are actually the photos actually I are here were all taken by me actually during the Second Life Community Convention trip that I had in 2009. So I happened to take a date to head down there while I was at the convention to shoot some of these photos. Uh, so this is about the Castro. In the middle of the museum here is another exhibit. This one is also transient. I occasionally put different things in and take this out at times, but around September of each year, I try to put this back and maybe add a little bit of content to it. So this one was added back in the autumn time frame last year, and it's LGBTQ heroes from the 9/11 uh, situation, and there's quite a few people who were, heroes that either saved lives or lost their lives during those events that many people don't know were part of the LGBT community. And so this exhibit tries to um, make you aware of them and what their contributions were on that day. In addition, there's, as you've seen, seating spaces throughout the museum, and one of the goals is, and I've, logged on and come in here at times and saw people sitting there having conversations, and the whole idea is it to also be a center to foster discussion and folks to meet. Um, so that's also another goal of the space, and that's why we have the outdoor space as well. The goal is let people meet up here and hopefully share ideas and contents. One thing I will say there, we've been quite fortunate. In the early days of the museum, it was a magnet for griefers. In 2006 and 2007, the museum was constantly being griefed. It always had to be in a lockdown situation, in terms of res rights and things like that. And there was always people around that had the ability to eject griefers and stuff. And in more recent years, that just hasn't been as much of an issue. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but it hasn't been, in recent years. But we've been fortunate in that regard. So that's the quick view and walkthrough of the museum. Um, I do, I'm here to answer any questions or take any suggestions that you might have. Um, and I invite you to take a walk around and ask any questions. So uh, that's what I have to say. The rest, I hope you will explore. And thank you for talking about the flow. By the way, as it turns out, this particular building is a prefab and I think meant to be largely a store, but I tweaked it a bit and made it work as a museum. So I'm glad to hear that you like the flow. This building we just put in place back in December, so this is our latest setup. Thank you. I appreciate all the feedback. Actually, yes, Val, we typically have places to sit outside. I think some of the benches are gone at the moment. I
Thank you,
think, Tim,
Kevin.
when we did the updates back in December, we didn't put as many um, benches out there, but there is a sitting area. There is a cafe out there space where folks can sit and enjoy. But we also usually have some benches out around the plaza as well, which I think we need to add back. and it looks like somebody just grabbed a an ice cream. So there is an ice cream cart up here. Again, try to promote being able to hang out and chat. Yes, Val, you mentioned the hot air balloon. So I think I was talking about that before you came in earlier. But out on the plaza, there are some things that folks can enjoy. There is a hot air balloon, and hopping on that balloon will take you for a tour of the historic Linden Village, which many years ago was a very vibrant area where each of the Lindens held office hours throughout the week and had offices and would interact with folks in the world. They stopped using that space largely around 2010 or so, and it's most of it unfortunately is blank. But the balloon will take you around to a different spots and tell you what was used in those spots. It'll take you around the Linden Temple, which is just across from the museum here, across the water, and will take you to the Welcome Center and some other sites in the area. So it's a scripted and guided tour, so you just hop on and it will take you around. I warn you, this is Second Life, so vehicles don't always make it across region borders as gracefully as we'd like. Um, but it's definitely a fun ride to take if you want to learn a little bit about the old Linden Village. And yes, Val, there is a helicopter landing pad and as well a boat marina out there. And that is for folks who participate in the game called GTFO, which is a game within Second Life. And I know GTFO as an acronym brings certain phrases to mind, but here in Second Life it means get the freight out, and it's a virtual game within Second Life where you haul freight between locations, and those locations, hopefully have content that you can then engage with and enjoy. It's meant to promote exploration within Second Life, and so the helipad out there and the marina is part of the build here to support folks who want to explore GTFO within Second Life. Also, that's some interesting. I the One of the reasons I love having the museum is I learn so much from people that visit all the time. Ah, Val wants to take a walk out to the cafe, so we can certainly do that. Uh, Rihanna, you asked about the SL Pride Festival. We have been invited to provide some exhibits and content to the second Pride Festival on several years. We have had exhibits there going back, to about the festival back in 2007 and throughout the years. Yes, we should go down the stairs, and the cafe is out front. We could actually take a step out on the plaza if you'd like, Val, and you know, folk, walk folks out to the cafe. And I can also point out the uh, Ilsa. I believe Alan Turing is here. I can certainly tell you Alan Turing is at the Computing History Museum. But you're right. If he's not here, he should be here as well. So this is back where we started, and as Val mentioned, this is a communal space here, the cafe. And again, the idea is to promote folks being able to sit around, chat, share ideas, and such. This is also where you can get the balloon tour of the Linden Museum. The balloon will take up to 4 people at a time. And as soon as the balloon leaves with one group, it'll res another one, I think about 30 seconds later. And then the balloon deletes itself when the tour is over or when the avatars leave. In addition, I think I mentioned when we first got here, but there is a space station above the museum. It doesn't have content that's part of the museum, but it's mostly there to be fun. It's also part of the GTFO game because there are spaceships and other ships within Second Life, and so folks can fly into the space station to make deliveries. And there is a rocket pod here. Where if you hop in the rocket pod, it will take you up to the space station, and there's another one that can take you back down. And it looks like somebody just headed off on the Linden Village tour. And as you see, the balloon will residue copy 30 seconds later if anyone else wants to do it. It does visit Philip Linden. As for folks who don't know, Philip
Curiosity killed the cat.
is the leader at Linden Lab and created Second Life very early on, along with his team. So this will visit Philip's location, a number of other locations, and the Linden Temple, which for folks who have their draw distance set far enough, if you look straight out over the water here, you can see the Linden Temple directly across the water from us. So, are there any other questions? I'll certainly be sticking around to answer any questions that come up. Yes, Val, the Linden Village landing point is right across from here. I don't think folks use it very much. When I do spend a significant amount of time here, I don't see a lot of activity there anymore. And looks like we have somebody taking the rocket pod up to the space station. So Val, the space station is not really part of the museum. It really is just a build where folks can explore, walk around. It has various things like a control room and some hangar areas and things like that. It's mostly there for folks who want to participate in the GTFO game, using spaceships to do deliveries. But we added the pod here so that folks can go up to it and explore it. And there's another pod up at the museum. I'm sorry, up at the space station that will bring you back here to the museum plaza. It's really just meant for exploration and fun. There's no museum content there or anything like that. And it is fun. Folks do say that the rocket pods look a little bit like a coffin, but they are fun. Yes, Val, there is a sign here on the plaza that gives out a landmark to the Museum of Computing History. The reason for that is the Museum of Computing History used to be here. Um, Back in when I first created it, I used space here for the Museum of Computing History, but quickly outgrew that space and had to move it over into where it's currently located in the Black Slough region. And that also gave me additional room here to expand the LGBT museum. There are no currently planned exhibits imminently planned for the LGBTQ museum. We just added the ones on LGBT marriage. For instance, in December, that was just added in mid-December, Rhiannon, and there are no others currently planned. Although keeping to schedule, I'm sure we'll add some more, uh, likely, in the I would say in the May to June timeframe. Usually just before Pride, I try to add some additional content. So that's the plan. We do have a few other exhibits that go on rotation. One is about LGBTQ athletes. Um, there's also an expanded exhibit about Provincetown, that sometimes circulates with the one on the Castro. We try to freshen it up to get folks to come back once in a while. Ah, great. Thank you. I will definitely get us into the directories. So did that answer your question, Joyce, about the exhibits? Yes, the 9/11 one is in rotation often, and for now, because I have expanded the museum, the museum was smaller before. The new building just went in December. I think the 9/11 one will stay for a little while at this point. But we do have one about LGBT athletes, which, if folks are interested in, I certainly can res that out at some point as well. And we're working on some others. Little Bear, that's a great idea. I agree. Um, Val, that's a good question, and the answer is yes. I do have another museum in me, I think, at this point, and I'm starting to gather exhibits and plans for it, and I can certainly share the. I have no promises about dates. I guess I can use the same phrase that the Lindens and the Moles use, and that is, soon. But there is a plan to launch a museum of telephony, which will be a museum about telephone and communication, starting, even earlier, with telegraph and things like that, moving through telephone, different telephone eras and things like that. So the idea is essentially a telecommunications museum. Exactly, Joyce. The idea would be to start with, telegraph, work through, various telephone, telex communications, and go all the way through, uh, you know, through broadband, fiber, etc., and along the way. So that's currently being worked on. And yes, Buffy, there is a cat. It's called Brevin Cat Island. It's actually a private region. It's a homestead, and it's not exactly a cat museum, though you certainly could call it that, but it's an educational space to learn about our feline friends, their behaviors, their food, etc. And I hear you on dogs, and that dogs need an equal space, and I do love dogs as well. Uh, on the other hand, I don't actually own dogs or have expertise, and so typically, again, I try to follow know what you love, and though I do love dogs, I don't have as much expertise there. I've taken care of a number of sick cats over the years, cats with GI problems, cats with cancer. I currently have two older cats, one with arthritis and gastrointestinal issues and pancreatitis, and another one with heart and breathing issues. So that's an area that I have gained a lot of expertise on just out of necessity. Sheila, you're mentioning online services using was that some of the bigger ones like the CompuServes or AOLs or whatever of the world, or was it something else? Oh, and Joyce, yes, Cat GPT. I was trying to figure out what to use for a Chat GPT demo, and well, I thought Cat GPT, make it a black cat, which looks like just like the real life cat that's sitting on my desk here right now. Oh, very neat, Sheila. I actually used dialogue many years ago through dial-up, and as you know, Bedline now is rather accessible via the web, thankfully. And yes, Joyce, a Chat Noir is exactly what I have sitting on my desk right now. Oh, that's excellent, Sheila. There's actually an exhibit in the Computing of Museum, the Museum of Computing History, um, on online services. So there's an exhibit about some of the online information services, including things like the old Plato um, system that was created a bunch by a bunch of universities, and actually the first sort of internet router, the BBN Imp, is in the museum. There's one you can open the door and look inside. In fact, and yes, as Val just mentioned, I will be giving a tour of the Museum of Computing History next Wednesday. That's a tour that Val arranged. Little Bear, are you asking about a gay youth exhibit? And no, but that is in fact one of the planned future exhibits is about LGBT youth and LGBT organizations that support LGBT youth. So that is a planned upcoming exhibit. One of the reasons that wasn't a focus on the museum, particularly in its earlier days, was not everyone may know this, but Second Life was split up into two entities. There used to be the main grid, which we're part of now, and then there was a separate grid called Teen Second Life, where anyone under the age of 18 had to use it. And so all of the content in the museum when it was created in 2006 was really focused on adults. But now I believe we can have folks as young as I think 16 in the grid here. And so I do hope to add some content to the museum for about youth and youth groups as well. And Joyce, I do remember the Global Kids. Um, oh, that's interesting, Ilsa. You started on the. Did you go through the graduation? I think they still have a build over in the Sea of Fables where Teen Grid folks would land in the mainland to get them acclimated before they went out in the world. That's interesting, Ilsa. Yeah, the transfer, I believe it's called the Teen Grid Transfer Station, is over in the Sea of Fables. The Museum of Computing History is actually located right next to the Sea of Fables, in fact. Um, and there's a possibility if I need to grow this museum further that we're going to have to move it. There's very sort of limited things that I can do with the land here in this location, and it if it's going to move, it'll ultimately move over near the Sea of Fables as well. That's the way I have my other builds. A little bit. I don't think it's a matter of LI. It's this particular location. It's a matter of the land. It's very hilly. It's a big hill. So if you've noticed, I've had to kind of build up this whole plaza to have the building on it, and so it makes it a bit difficult. So what I would probably do is just locate some more flatter land around the Sea of Fables to do it. Actually, I believe it's only plus or minus 4 meters, Joyce, on the mainland. So I have very limited things I can do here. Thank you, Val. Thank you for setting this up. Joyce, as you mentioned, yes, very limited ability to terraform land here, and in fact, when we were building the Cat Island just a few months ago, it was quite liberating to have a private region and be able to do whatever we wanted to do with that. So I'll definitely hang out here if anyone has any questions or just wants to share ideas. Happy to do so. But I believe time wise this concludes the tour, and I believe the NPC folks you have some other things you might have planned or that you're doing today. And this space is open all the time, so folks are welcome to come and visit here and enjoy this space at any time. We do have reasonably generous res rights, particularly over in the GTFO areas, so you can res vehicles out with a 60-minute auto return. Uh, so the spaces can be used as well. And I know a few of you have sent me IMs. I will try to catch up with those. I've been trying to keep up with the chat and everything going on, but I will definitely get back to everyone that's IM'd me. And thank you, everybody. Appreciate everyone that joined. And thank you to the folks. A couple of folks have dropped some objects and note cards on me with suggestions and I think some gifts. So thank you for those.